Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us at the Project Censored Radio Show. We are very glad right now to be joined by Sasha Lorenz, the spokesperson for the initiative Lützerath Lebt, which we will get into what that means. But Sasha, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out to us. I'm glad to be here.
Very glad to have you. And I wanted to start off with a bit of context because, as with so many things that we discuss on this show, U.S. media has totally avoided this story. So people might be wondering, gosh, what is Lützerath and what does this mean? And the story takes us to a small town called Lützerath in the Rhineland region of Western Germany. For listeners who know and or enjoy geography, despite the best efforts of U.S. schools. So this village has been at the center of an ongoing struggle against coal in Germany for years, as it stood in the crosshairs of a planned expansion of an existing coal mine, the Garzweiler mine, owned and operated by coal giant RWE. The planned expansion would give RWE access to some 280 million tons of lignite coal. And for those listening who aren't familiar with that term, lignite coal is also known as brown coal. It's a younger coal than what many in the US think of as coal, which is black coal by comparison. It is softer, and you have to burn more lignite coal in order to get the same amount of energy as you would from burning a smaller amount of black coal. So it is more disastrous environmentally, both in the excavation and in the use. And in mid-January, environmental organization Ende Gelände announced that Lützerath had ultimately been evacuated pending destruction and announced plans to block and disrupt lignite infrastructure in the Rhenish coalfield. So with that context, Sasha, and I'm giving that context because I didn't want to ask you on just to go through the basics of the situation. I wanted to get more into details about what's happened recently. Why now? It seems like Lützerath was for several years, people were fighting the destruction. Why did this finally happen now after so many years?
Yeah, it's true that Lützerath has been there for 2.5 years. People have been building up this little place of resistance and have managed actually to build some kind of utopia over there where people are living in solidarity and not following this whole logic of capitalism as in the rest of our society mainly. However, finally there was a deal struck between the Green Ministry of NRW, which is the region where also Lützerath is in, and like the Ministry of Economy, as well as Robert Habeck, who is the one of the ministers of the German government, also from the Green Party, and lately the manager of RWE. And the agreement was that instead of having the coal phase out in 2038 as it was planned before, to have it in 2030, which they tried to put as a win for the climate, basically, which is in the first place already not true, because right now it seems like the same amount of coal will be burned, just in a faster pace. So it will actually be almost the same amount of coal or even more that will be burned beforehand, which, considering that we have climate tipping points, it's even worse that we have now this amount of coal being burned so fast. But on the other hand side, RWE got the permission to destroy Lützerath and take the coal underneath it. And because, in the short term, RWE is actually still making profit with coal, considering that there's a lot of subsidies from the state and some other economic thoughts that I can get into if you're interested in why it's still profitable for RWE to actually burn that coal. And so that's why now they were pressing so much to evict this village. And it's another point where you can actually see that the state is putting capital interests and the profits of huge enterprises over the livelihood of people in the region, as well as notably in the global south, where thousands of people are already dying from the consequences of the climate crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. It clearly has global implications. And I think that some listeners might have tilted their heads a bit when you said it was a deal struck with the Green Party, because particularly in the US. I mean, we have a Green Party, but it never really gets anywhere because we have totally rigged elections. But the idea that the Green Party would be supporting a massive coal expansion seems absurd. What happened there? I mean, what's going on with the Green Party?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because also some years ago there was another forest occupation, the Hambacher Forst. Some people might have heard of it, and at that time the Green Party was still, yeah, on the side of the climate activists, actually protesting against the eviction and against the destruction. But what we can see now is that as soon as they got into the government, they had to start making compromises, as they call it. And for us, that makes very clear that in our current system, where profit is valued higher than anything else, no party is actually able to have a program which is in alignment with the 1.5 degree obligation that also Germany signed with the Paris Agreement. And so for us, it became clear that we have to change the system itself and not rely on any party that will in the end not be able to fight the climate crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. The system is crooked, not just a political party here and there. And I know you'd mentioned that the economics of the situation, and I am curious about that because I know that in the United States, at least, there are, like oil companies like Exxon are starting to invest in wind energy and solar energy because they see what's going on. Is RWE doing the same thing, or are they pretty much just focused on coal and desperately trying to get all of it they can before 2030?
No, they are actually also focusing on the renewable energies, and they're doing a lot of greenwashing, trying to put themselves as an enterprise that's actually looking into the future, and trying to be progressive. But what we see at the same time is that they are still using coal as a profitable source of gains for their company, because we have this energy trading like certificates that are traded, emission trading system. It's a scheme that is working on the European level, also on a German one, but especially on the European one. We saw that the certificates that you had to buy for each ton of CO2 that you're emitting, they became pretty expensive recently. Like they're above 60 euros now, but back in the years they were super cheap. And because the system is not really well thought through, it is possible to buy those certificates and keep them and use them later on. And that's what RWE did. So from some sources inside the company, we actually know that they bought enough certificates until the phase out of coal. So they don't have to buy any certificates on the price that is on the market right now. And they got the ones that were still really, really cheap. So for them, they're actually making a lot of profit. And we just recently got the message that they even had to increase their gain forecast, or like their forecast was not as high. I think they made like 6 billion euros gain this year. It's incredible. And that's again a point where we see that this company is using the system and the capitalistic logic that we have right now to make as many profits as possible, considering that all the negative climate consequences are not in the price. They're externalized, and it's the people in the global south that are suffering the most on it. And I think that this is also a point where Lützerath comes in as an important symbol, because we always say that there's 2 points on Lützerath. The one is like the concrete fight about the tons of coal, the millions of tons that are underneath Lützerath and that should stay there. But it's also just like a point of I don't know if you can say crystallization. So it's actually all coming together in the small village, where you can see that so many people from all over the world have shown their solidarity with it. And we have stand in solidarity with all the fights in the global south, notably, that have been ongoing for tens of years already. And there are people that have much higher risks, and they are fighting for a long time already. So I think it's really important to also see that we can give voices and we can give attention to them, because considering our also the racist system that we live in, which makes white lives always seem so much more valuable. And that's why also the attention is so much more on places like Lützerath than on the fights in the global south that are happening for such a long time already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the whole concept of paying, I always thought is that was so ridiculous. Like, oh, we're just going to buy these tokens that allow us to pollute, like as if the ecosystems give a whether you paid to pollute there. It's such a bizarre system. And of course, it's the capitalist system. And as you pointed out, it is racist as well as a classist system, of course. And I kind of wanted to also talk about that because Germany has such great PR in terms of, I mean, at least what we hear of in the US, like, oh, go green like Germany's doing, you know? And there's pictures of wind energy all over the country, and oh, Germany's really going green. And I think most people would be very surprised to hear that the largest and most pollutive coal plants in Europe are in fact in Germany. And speaking of the plan to phase out coal and things like that, does that really feel to you like it will happen in 2030, or is this just yet another, hey, we're going to put a marker here, and then once we get there, we're going to push it even further? Like, what do you see legitimately happening as a consequence of living with this system?
Yeah, considering the 2030 coal phase out, I do believe that it's happening. Also because a lot of experts already said that or showed that also in the logic of the market, it will not be profitable anymore to use coal. So basically, it's the deal also that was made is not really a political decision for climate protection. It's more like something that would have happened anyways, and something that is also showing me again how two-faced Germany is in a way, is that you can see now that there's already a lot of deals that are made for long term with states like Qatar to get gasoline, which is in the end a bit better than brown coal, but in the end it's also a climate killer and a polluter. And the same is like with other coal mines, for example, really huge coal mines in the south of America, where we have mines that are 30 times as big as the ones in Germany. And now we are planning to, like, the government is planning to do deals with those countries to get energy again, also from very dirty sources. So I think that we can see that again, it's like a colonial continuity that Germany is trying to exploit other countries that don't have maybe the means to resist against this exploitation, and then trying to put itself as a green country, which is absolutely not true.
Yeah, the European offloading of the issues of climate chaos onto the global south, even with things like recycling, like, oh, we recycle everything. Well, you shipping it to the global south for them to burn it does not mean that you're a green nation. So yeah, it is a colonialist problem that stems from the advent of colonialism hundreds of years ago. And I'm curious about how people, because obviously there were tens of thousands of people who ended up going to Lützerath during the peak of, as I understand it, of the fight here. How do people in Germany feel about what happened at Lützerath, and how do people feel about this shift in energy? Importing gas from Qatar and things like that. What's the temperature like in terms of how people are feeling in Germany?
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult to say that in general because there's a lot of different opinions, obviously. But some interesting numbers are maybe that there was a survey, and 59% of the people said that they do not want Lützerath to be destroyed, because it was quite clear from early times in the discussion that it's not necessary, because there were several studies showing that it's not necessary to actually destroy Lützerath and take the coal underneath, because there's a lot of other coal around that could be used before, even considering that we need the coal to continue producing the way that we're producing and living the way we're living. And then I think that the government used the fear that was made because of the energy crisis that we have, because that was also one of the main arguments why Lützerath has to go, is that we need extra energy because of the crisis. However, it was also shown that the coal underneath Lützerath would have not even been able to be burned before in 2 or 3 years, because we still have a lot of saved coal that has to be burned before. So that argument was actually also obsolete. So I think a lot of people actually do not agree with the destruction of Lützerath. And what I also think is that what we have to make more clear is that also it's also, as you already mentioned, part of a classist problem, because the fact that people are afraid because of their energy bills is also due to the situation that the energy for the private consumption is much more expensive than for the industry. It's more than double the price. And because the industry again is subsidized by the government. And I think that this all again shows the problem that people are actually the ones that have to carry the burden of the government making wrong decisions, and not the industry, and not the people in the industry that are actually making the profit. So I think that kept in mind, people do understand the struggle that was happening in Lützerath to a certain extent, even though the media was trying very hard, especially the mainstream media, to show Lützerath as some activists that were radicalized and trying to withstand the decisions of a democratic government. However, I think that it became very clear, especially on the demonstration where over 35,000 people came, is that what the government is deciding on at the moment, especially when we look again at the Green Party, people do not understand how this is possible, because they voted for a Green Party that wanted to save the Paris Agreement and protect the climate, and that's absolutely not happening. So a lot of people actually stand with the activists in Lützerath. And again, what we've also seen is that there were thousands of people that actually left the demonstration and went towards Lützerath in an action of civil disobedience, which has been new, that it was so many people from all different parts of the society, because they just understood and they wanted to show that what is legal is not necessarily legitimate. And in this case, it was clearly not.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful, and 35,000 people is remarkable. And I can, just as an organizer in the US myself, I'm jealous. And I feel like a lot of people listening would probably be jealous too, because it is very difficult to get people out to these actions. Of course, these days in the U.S., they're not really destroying towns like that in that kind of overt bulldozing sense. It's more like destroying them slowly by poisoning them or things like that. But there's so much division in the U.S., whether that be class or race or background or things like that are used against us, so that when there's one of these fights, it's difficult, for instance, to get a poor white community on your side, even though you are trying to protect their home place and their health as well. So it's incredibly powerful to hear that that's going on in Germany. And I'm a little jealous, but we can definitely pick your brain about tactics and other things like that. And I am kind of curious what before we get into that space, because after, as I understand it, after the evacuation of Lützerath happened, there was blockades and disruption at other lignite areas in the Rhenish coal field. Can you talk a little bit about that, and perhaps plans for the future in that area or in other coal areas in Germany?
Yeah. So Ende Gelände, as you already mentioned, as an group of activists or an initiative that is trying to block coal for a long time, and now they're also onto LNG gas, because this is the problem that's going to come towards us in the near future. They were doing some mass actions of civil disobedience, trying to block the diggers from digging the coal in the coal mine. And I think that more actions like this are going to happen, because in the end, Lützerath was a symbol, was a real place, was some kind of utopia that people could live and see and learn from and connect in, with all the fights all over the world for the time that it was there, and that was super important. Um, However, the coal is still there, so I think that as long as the coal is still there, people will continue resisting and will continue to take action. And as you mentioned, there's other coal mines in Germany as well, and there have been actions already, and there will be further actions at some point. Like in East Germany, for example, there's another huge region of coal that is just as catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's at least in the US, it feels like a terrible game of whack-a-mole, just trying to get to all of these fights. And so, as I mentioned, finally, I would love to hear some insight into, because I do believe that a lot of people listening to this show are trying to figure out ways to mobilize and to get folks involved with these issues wherever they live. How do you do outreach in places that might have completely different political perspectives or social perspectives, in order to get people involved in these fights? What kind of organizing tactics would you recommend?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because I feel like Lützerath was like somehow self-developing. Like, people in the beginning, people didn't really know about it, but the more it became a thing in the, I think first of all among the people that are climate sensitive, I could say, or that are into the whole movement anyways. But then also, with the more attention it got, the more the media also documented what was happening there, the more people just yeah brought their attention there and realized that it's a very specific situation, because the fight for those villages has been ongoing for a long time already, and now, since five was saved by the pressure of the climate activists, and the one was left that was supposed to be evicted, or that was evicted by now, I think that had a huge impact. This feeling of there's this very little village that is still somehow managing to resist, and that is, as already mentioned, that is so much a place where you could actually see how society could work out when people are living in solidarity, when everyone is welcome. And of course, it was not a place where everything was working out perfect, but it was a place where people were taking the time to handle the conflict that were upcoming, and where people actually connected, and also did so. There were so many skill shares happening. There was so much knowledge transfer for the movement and for anyone who was coming and just wanted to learn. And I think that again, this was also a reason why in the end it was evicted with so much police. And I think that if you've seen the videos, you cannot even believe what amounts of police have been shuttled there. There was like horses and dogs and like police from almost all over Germany that came there, because I think that the police and the government, they realized that this is like a vocal point, geographically spoken and also symbolic, of the movement, where that had developed so much strength and so much soft power in the way it was like shining to so many places, and also lightning, like showing the solidarity and showing the meaning of other fights and struggles that were going on, that they had to actually destroy it, because otherwise it would have been really a point where people could meet and where people could organize for more actions. And that's something that I would just like to mention as well, because it didn't come up so far, was the fact that I think it was one of the first, or it was not one of the first, but it was a really important situation there during the eviction, but also after the eviction, to see the police violence that was actually happening. Because I think that during the demonstration, it became very, very clear that the police was really brutal and violent against like activists, and also civil society that was there just with their bodies, not being not having those helmets or the pepper spray or whatever, and just with their bodies trying to resist against the eviction of the village and the destruction. And the police really came in with their batons and they were beating up people. Some people, like more than a dozen people, had to go to hospital because of the police. It's incredible. And I think that this was a moment where there was so much mainly white, mainly middle class activists and civil society, that the media was actually covering the subject more than many times before. And it was a moment where it became clear to so many people that it's actually not a single case. It's a system, a racist and violent police system that is like a reality for a lot of marginalized groups and BIPOC people in society, but most of the time this is invisible. And on this day, it became very visible. So I think that we as Lützerath Lebt also want to put more focus and put more attention on these struggles of so many groups in Germany that are fighting this police system for also tens of years already. And again, it's the same in Europe, if you consider Frontex, that is also some kind of police that is killing refugees that try to, again, avoid, like, flee from conflicts that are connected to the climate crisis, coming to Europe, being beaten up, and other countries where protests are beaten up by a police. So I think that all this shows together the connection of a racist and violent police in a capitalist system that is protecting the profit of the few against against activists that are trying to go on and protect the climate and the livelihood of people. So I think that this is also something that came up newly, and I think that has a lot of potential to get more people involved and get more struggles connected. And I know that this is not really helping to understand how you could organize better, but yeah, I just hope that this will keep on, like, the strength of the movement. I'm pretty sure that it will keep on doing more things and getting more connected to other fights, and hopefully also to struggles in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as part of this, this is an hour show, the Project Censored Radio Show, and the other half of this show is speaking with someone from Defend Atlanta Forest, where, of course, a forest defender was murdered by police. So, which I believe is the first time, to my knowledge, in the U.S. where a forest defender has been murdered by police. And so I think that those connections are important to make, because it's clear that police violence is escalating, perhaps more quickly in the U.S. because police are descended from slave patrols in the U.S. But I guess the police in Germany have a bit of a tricky past as well. But and with that, I'm also curious, do you feel like this was the most violent that you've seen the police be against climate activists so far? Do you feel like it's escalating quite a bit as well?
I'm not sure if you can say that it was necessarily more violent than other evictions that happened before. I think that it was, in its amount, it was quite unique, because the police also learned from the evictions that were taking place before, and they wanted it to be very fast. And you could see that they were really ruthless and really put into risk a lot of life during the eviction by continuing evicting during the night, cutting traverses where people were, like, cutting trees that were connected to traverses where people were hanging in, and so on. So they really risked a lot of life. But I think that this situation in the demonstration was a bit different, because it was not only against climate activists as such, but again, a lot of people that were never in action before and that were completely unprepared towards this police violence. I think there was a new level of who they targeted, I could say.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, as you mentioned as well, the idea of organizing, not just reaching out to climate folks, but, making sure that people that are just your neighbors or just somebody that you know from the store or something like that, like all of these people are clearly impacted. So and the skill shares that you mentioned, I think these are powerful ways to connect people and welcome people, regardless of where they might be coming from socially or politically or what have you. So Sasha, thank you so much. I mean, there's so many different places we could go with this, but of course, time is a difficult master. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention that maybe I didn't already ask?
I think that maybe I would just like to mention again, or to stress again the positive outcome of it as well, because I think that many of us are focusing very much on the violence that happened, of the destruction that is happening, and I think that is super important to actually look at that, because again, also the media is not picking up on it so much. And if you look at the media in Germany, you will hear from violence of activists against the police all over, and very little about the violence of the police against the activists. But despite all those negative and very frustrating facts, I was really surprised by the strength that I experienced in the movement, and also by all the new people that came and were there, experienced what happened, and went back home and are now really motivated to get active and to politically, like so many people were politicized. And I think that this is something new, and it made me quite optimistic that much more will be possible in the future. And this is just like this fight is just a little part of all the struggles worldwide, but it's also just the start of an ongoing fight in Germany. And I really think that, yeah, we have a world to win.
That was very beautifully put. And thank you so much for pointing that out, because I think, again, when we talk about these issues, it can get very depressing. And I love the idea of leaving with hope, because that is powerful. And it's sometimes the only thing we have to hold on to. So Sasha, thank you so much again for taking the time to sit down with us.
With pleasure. Thanks to you.